Welcome, everybody. My name is Zack Surunis, and I'll be sharing a short testimony. I'm going to try and keep it under 5 minutes about how Jesus changed my life. And so basically, I was born and raised in Oakland, had a pretty normal upbringing, lived with my mom and my dad and my siblings. And my mom and dad were married, and we had a pretty peaceful household growing up. And went to a private elementary school, actually. And when I was about 7 years old, some of my mom's struggles with her brother committing suicide before I was born and killing his 2 sons, the emotions around that really opened the door for all kinds of brokenness between her and my father, and it led to their divorce. And so that was when I was about 7 years old, and for the next 7 years I was raised in a split home. My dad lived in Alameda and my mom lived in Contra Costa County. And when I was about 14 years old, on my way to school one day, I was hit by a car. And for me, I was very like a normal kid, pretty much. Grew up very happy, very secure in myself, and just saw the world as a place of opportunities and felt like nothing could break me, and I felt like a very strong boy growing up, you know? And when I was hit by a car, I realized how quick things can change and how painful life can be at times and how uncertain life is at times. And in that pain, coupled with the fact that I was a 14-year-old boy going through, you know, puberty and fluctuating emotions and stuff like that, I became very like rebellious and angry, and broke a relationship with my father, basically didn't want anything to do with him. And this was a result of the trauma from the accident, and all of a sudden all these behaviors started manifesting in my life, and I was very angry, didn't really care about school anymore or succeeding and getting good grades. And once I encountered some friends who were like smoking weed and stuff, I picked up weed. Knew it wasn't the right thing to be doing, but when I got high for the first time, I felt like all this pain that had entered into my life was just washed away. And I found comfort in drugs, and I found community in the people who were also broken, who were seeking comfort in drugs and rebellious lifestyles and crime and anger and vandalism and all these things, and sexual immorality. And so I began to pick up and adopt these behaviors. I became very addicted to drugs, and this downward spiral continued for about 5 years or so. And soon I was addicted to heroin and addicted to methamphetamine. And I tried going into rehab to get better. But my own desire was to be high, because I could only find comfort and peace in myself when I was loaded. And I felt like the people who were doing drugs and living this crazy lifestyle with me, I felt like they were family and I could relate to them and stuff. And eventually my lifestyle caught up with me, and I found myself sitting in a jail cell with lots of free time on my hands. And this was the first time I curiously opened the Bible, and I was just wondering, what's the Bible about? Like, who's this Jesus that churches celebrate and worship? And once I opened the Bible and started reading the words of Jesus and saw his miracle power and how he set people free and how he healed people and how he taught the way to heaven, and he taught how to live a righteous life in accordance with God's will, not our own will, I was caught on fire. I just saw that there was something worth living for in what Jesus was talking about. And I began to obey him and practice what he preached. And soon relationships in my life started becoming mended. I got out of addiction. But because I didn't hold on to my faith in Christ with all my strength, I soon fell back into old behaviors. And soon I was worse off than before. I was worse off than I was when I first got into jail. And the addiction got really bad. I was really just like super broken. All my relationships were broken. And eventually I got into a rehab where a woman who was a counselor at this rehab told me that Jesus said very clearly in the Bible that you can't have peace with God without inviting Jesus into your heart. So I took Jesus for his words and I welcomed Jesus into my life that day. And I asked for his forgiveness. And keep in mind, I was just out of addiction, so I was about 7 days clean and sober. I was like struggling with depression and anxiety and just evil desires, wanting to go back to my lifestyle, and just feeling so much hopelessness and so much brokenness, so much unforgiveness and hatred and anger towards the world and the pain that I was feeling. And I used to just cope with those feelings through drugs. And this woman told me to invite Jesus into my life, and shortly thereafter, I was laying down just to rest, and I was just in this room where they were having like relaxation time, and all of a sudden I was hit with this mighty power in the core of my being, and everything about my existence was shaken like nothing I've ever felt before in my life. And I saw a bright light from heaven, and I jumped up and was like, what just happened? And no one else around me knew what happened because they didn't experience it. It was only me. And from that moment on, my life's never been the same. Something left me that day, something that had taken residence in me, and it was destroying my relationships, it was destroying my life. And I welcomed Jesus into my heart, had this powerful encounter, and I began to feel tremendous peace in my life, and I began to feel like everything was okay, and I wasn't chasing something to make me feel better all the time. And yeah, I mean, that's my testimony in short. I've been set free from addiction now for 4 years. I've been healed from ailments and stuff in the past, and the more I walk with Jesus, the more I see that he's my strength and he's my provider, and that all I need to do is obey God's will and know him, and I will become like him. And that's what God created all of us to do, is to know God and to become like Christ. So all glory to Jesus. God bless you all. Amen.
All right, brother.